She had learned how to hold her life together quietly. That was what people noticed first about Amara Cole. Not beauty, though she had it in an unassuming way, not brilliance, though her mind moved with steady precision, but composure. The kind that came from being relied on too early, from understanding that if she didn't show up fully, things would fall apart. Most mornings began before sunrise. The city outside her apartment window was still undecided about itself, caught between night and morning, and Amara liked it that way. It felt honest. She brewed her coffee strong, reviewed her calendar without drama, and dressed in clothes that made her feel capable rather than seen. At 32, she was a senior project analyst at an international development firm based in Nairobi, known for handling complex cross-border initiatives with a calm others admired but didn't often question. She had once imagined her life would feel bigger by now, more laughter, more certainty, but instead it felt precise, measured, useful. That had to count for something. The email arrived on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. A new assignment. 90 days. Joint oversight with a partner firm in Seoul. Cross-cultural coordination, infrastructure review, stakeholder alignment. The kind of work that sounded impressive and slightly exhausting, the kind that required diplomacy more than brilliance. She read the message twice, then once more, slower. 90 days wasn't long. Just a quarter of a year. Long enough to disrupt routines, short enough to promise nothing permanent. She accepted without ceremony. 2 weeks later, she found herself in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Han River, jet lag humming softly behind her eyes. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and citrus cleaner. Everything felt orderly, intentional. He was already there when she arrived. Kang Jun-seok stood near the window, hands loosely clasped behind his back, gaze angled outward as if the city required his full attention. He wore a dark suit without fuss, his posture straight, but not rigid. There was a stillness about him that suggested discipline rather than coldness. Highly respected, she had been told, reserved, difficult to read. He turned when the door closed, offering a nod that was polite, measured. "Ms. Cole?" he said, his English precise, lightly accented. "Welcome." "Thank you," she replied, returning the nod. "Please call me Amara." A brief pause. Not awkward exactly, just careful. "Jun-seok," he said finally. "I look forward to working together." They shook hands. His grip was firm but brief, professional to the point of restraint. No spark, no jolt, just acknowledgement. If anything, what she felt was curiosity. Their first meeting unfolded like most professional introductions. Agenda items, timelines, deliverables. He spoke less than she expected, but listened intently, eyes steady, occasionally making notes in neat, deliberate strokes. When he disagreed, it was gentle, almost apologetic, but unmistakably firm. She respected that. When it ended, he escorted her to the elevator himself, a courtesy that felt intentional. "If you need anything during your stay," he said as the doors slid open, "please let me know." "I will," she said, and she meant it. At the time, it felt like nothing special. Just work. Just another collaboration. If you enjoy slow, meaningful love stories, stay with this one. The days settled into a rhythm. Morning briefings, site visits, long afternoons reviewing reports side by side. The quiet punctuated only by the hum of the building and the occasional turning of pages. They learned each other's habits without comment. He drank his coffee black, always afternoon. She preferred tea in the afternoons, something warm to steady her focus. He organized his files meticulously. She worked in clusters, returning to documents when insight struck, rather than in neat sequence. During their first week of travel outside the city, she noticed he always ensured she ate before meetings ran long. Nothing dramatic, just a pause, a quiet suggestion, a subtle redirection of schedules. She noticed. She didn't mention it. He noticed her patience, the way she navigated disagreements without defensiveness, the way she made room for quieter voices in meetings, even when time pressed. Late one evening, as rain streaked down the hotel windows and their laptops glowed softly between them, their conversation drifted, just slightly, beyond work. "You handle pressure well," he said, not looking up. "So do you," she replied. A pause. "Perhaps," he said, "but it is learned." She smiled faintly. "Most things are." They returned to their screens, but something had shifted. Not romance, not yet. Trust. You'll want to see how this partnership slowly changes them. They shared meals that became longer than necessary, walks that weren't required, silences that felt comfortable rather than empty. Cultural differences surfaced gently, her laughter louder, his humor drier, her openness balanced by his restraint. Neither reached across the line, neither named what was forming, but both felt it. And somewhere beneath the schedules and spreadsheets, the 90 days continued to count down. The second week arrived without announcement, the way routines always did, by quietly settling in. Amara stopped checking the calendar each morning to count how many days had passed, not because the number didn't matter, but because the work demanded her full attention. Their project was unfolding smoothly on paper, but reality insisted on its own tempo. Contractors arrived late. Permits stalled. Community leaders asked questions no report had anticipated. Junseok handled these moments with a calm that never drew attention to itself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush conclusions. He waited, listened, then spoke with just enough clarity to move things forward. During one site visit outside the city, the afternoon stretched longer than expected. The sun dipped lower, casting warm light across half-finished structures and dusty roads. The team dispersed gradually, conversations tapering off as vehicles pulled away. Amara found herself walking beside him in the quiet that followed. "You don't seem frustrated," she said, more observation than question. He considered this. "Frustration is not useful when people are trying their best," she smiled. "That's rare." "Is it?" He glanced at her. "You seem similar." "Only because I've learned the cost of impatience." He nodded once, as if filing the thought away. That evening, they ate at a small restaurant recommended by one of the local coordinators. The place was modest, the kind where menus were suggestions, and the food arrived when it was ready. Amara watched as Junseok tried the meal carefully at first, then with more confidence. "This is good," he said, surprised. She laughed softly. "You sound relieved." "I am," he admitted. "I'm not very adventurous with food." "I'll keep that in mind." Their laughter lingered a moment longer than necessary. Back in Seoul, late nights became common. They reviewed documents after dinner. Laptops opened between them in quiet corners of hotel lounges or office meeting rooms emptied of everyone else. Sometimes they worked in silence for long stretches, the kind that felt earned rather than imposed. Other times, conversation found its way in. She told him about growing up between countries, how she learned early to translate not just language, but expectations. He told her about responsibility, how being the eldest son meant stepping into roles before he felt ready. Neither spoke with self-pity. They listened. One evening, as they walked back toward her hotel under a sky hazy with city light, Amara slowed her steps. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "I think," he said finally, "that wishing too much can make you forget what you have been given." She nodded. "That sounds like something you've had to learn." "Yes," he said simply. She glanced at him then, really looked. Not at the professional calm, not at the careful distance, but at the man who had learned restraint because life required it. Something warmed quietly in her chest. At the halfway mark of their assignment, the 90 days resurfaced in conversation. not as a warning, just as a fact. We'll need to start planning the transition, Junseok said during a meeting, his tone steady. So there's continuity after Ms. Cole returns? She nodded, taking notes. Of course. The words were reasonable, necessary. Still that night, she stared a little longer at the city from her window. She wondered when the work had started to feel personal. Don't forget to like if this story is touching you so far. The shift came on a night neither of them had expected to matter. They were reviewing a delayed report, tension low, but fatigue high. Amara rubbed her temples, eyes closed briefly. Headache? Junseok asked. Just tired, she said. It's been a long year. He waited. She hadn't planned to say more, but the quiet invited honesty. My last project ended badly, she said. Not the work, the people. I trusted the wrong intentions. He closed his laptop slowly, giving her his full attention. I'm sorry, he said. That can change how you see things. It did, she admitted. It made me careful. He nodded, understanding more than she expected. I was engaged once, he said. She looked up, surprised. It ended because I chose work when I should have chosen presence. A pause. I don't regret my career, but I regret the cost. They sat with that. The truth resting gently between them. No hands reached. No promises formed. But something quiet, unmistakable, took root. They became more aware of each other after that. Not in ways that broke boundaries, but in ways that acknowledged them. The space between them felt charged, not with tension, but with recognition. They were nearing the point where knowing became feeling, and neither said a word. The weather changed as if to mark the turn. Rain arrived without warning, draping the city in soft gray and slowing everything just enough to make people notice their own thoughts. Amara found herself moving more deliberately through her days, aware of how often Junseok now occupied them. Not as an interruption, but as a constant presence. They no longer needed to ask who would handle what. Decisions flowed naturally between them. When disagreements surfaced, they resolved them with respect, each trusting the other's judgment without needing to win. It was during a short trip to Busan that the unspoken finally settled into clarity. They had traveled separately that morning, schedules misaligned, but met at the site just after noon. The sea air carried a sharpness that felt cleansing, and the horizon stretched endlessly beyond the industrial outlines of the port. Work finished earlier than expected. We have time, Junseok said, glancing at his watch. Before the train, they walked without destination, coats pulled close against the wind. Vendors lined the streets near the harbor, their calls blending with the cries of seabirds overhead. Amara stopped at a stall selling hot snacks, the steam rising in inviting clouds. You should try this, she said, already ordering. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. I trust you. The words landed heavier than they should have. They ate standing side by side, watching the water. The city noise faded into something distant, secondary. My mother used to bring us here when we were young, he said, surprising her, when things felt difficult. Does it still help? Yes, he said. It reminds me that some things continue, regardless. She nodded, understanding without needing more. The vulnerability came later that evening, unplanned and unguarded. The train had been delayed. They waited on the platform, the night stretching longer than expected. Rain fell steadily now, tapping against metal and glass. I never planned to live like this, Amara said quietly, watching the tracks. Always moving, always leaving. He turned toward her. What did you plan? She smiled, a little sadly. Something quieter. Shared. I suppose I thought it would happen naturally. And now? And now I wonder if I've been too good at adapting. He considered this. Adaptation is not the same as avoidance, he said, but it can become that if we are not careful. She looked at him then, searching his face. And you? She asked. Did you plan this life? No, he said, but I accepted it because it felt responsible. There it was, the truth beneath his calm. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's warmth, far enough to respect the boundary neither had crossed. This was the moment love woke, not loudly, not with urgency, but with certainty. They didn't name it. They returned to Seoul changed, though nothing in their behavior would have revealed it to anyone else. But small things shifted. He waited for her before meetings that didn't require it. She lingered after conversations that could have ended sooner. Their eyes met more often, held just a fraction longer. The 90 days began to feel real again. So we'll wrap this phase by the end of next month, a director said during a briefing. Amara wrote it down, her pen steady. Jun Seok's expression didn't change. That night, they worked later than usual. The office lights dimmed automatically around them, leaving only their space illuminated. "You've been quiet," she said finally. "So have you," he replied. A pause. "This assignment," he said carefully, "has been meaningful." She met his gaze. Yes. They both understood what remained unsaid. But understanding did not make choice easier. Pressure followed soon after. A new opportunity was mentioned to Amara. An extended role in Europe. Long-term, prestigious. The kind of position people congratulated you for before you had time to think. Jonsuk heard about it indirectly. He didn't ask her about it right away. Instead, he grew quieter. Their conversations shortened. Work remained smooth, but warmth receded, replaced by professionalism sharpened just enough to feel like distance. Amara noticed immediately. She told herself it was sensible, that boundaries were being respected, that this was how it should be. Still, the quiet hurt. They did not argue. They simply stepped back. This was the pain of restraint, of wanting without reaching, of caring without claiming. They both began to believe that what had formed between them might not survive the world they lived in, and yet neither could pretend it had been imagined. The days passed with a delicate weight. Amara moved through her routine deliberately, checking off tasks, attending meetings, making notes, but her mind often lingered on the empty spaces between her and Jun-suk. His presence, once quietly comforting, now felt like a reminder of something she could not name aloud. They still worked together. Work could not pause for uncertainty. But the warmth had receded into something more formal. Jun-seok's words were polite, precise, efficient, nothing more. Even the small gestures, the thoughtful pauses to ensure she ate or rested, became rarer. She felt it most on a rainy morning in the office. The sky outside pressed gray against the windows. Papers shuffled, keyboards clicked, and the coffee machine hummed. Amara glanced at him across the table. He was focused, unreadable, and something about the quiet made her chest tighten. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. He looked up, expression neutral. "Yes, I am fine." But she could feel the distance. Not the kind that could be explained by deadlines. Not the kind that could be solved with conversation. This was something deeper. She returned to her work, pretending the ache in her chest was just fatigue. Evenings became lonelier. After long days, she would walk the streets of Seoul alone, the neon reflections and puddles tracing the rhythm of a heart-learning patience. She remembered the laughter they had shared over small meals, the quiet conversations in the hotel lounges, the moments of silence that had felt charged and safe, and she wondered if it had ever meant more than work. Jun-seok felt it too. He watched her from across conference rooms, noticed the way her shoulders carried tension, how her eyes held a softness that wasn't there before the distance grew. Every time she spoke, he weighed his words carefully, ensuring he did not betray the feelings he had begun to recognize, the feelings he had not allowed himself to name. The 90-day mark loomed closer, a silent countdown neither could stop. Amara had begun packing a suitcase for the end of the assignment, a symbolic act of closure she wasn't sure she wanted. She organized her files, printed summaries, scheduled calls for the handover. Each movement was precise, practical, and yet each carried the weight of inevitability. Jun Seok, on the other hand, walked the office corridors more slowly. He found himself lingering at the edges of her workspace, waiting for opportunities to speak. But every time he tried, words failed him. One night, they ended a particularly long day, together in silence. She looked at him, almost instinctively, as she zipped her laptop into its case. "Will this project change anything after we leave?" she asked softly, her voice careful. He hesitated. The question was not about work. "I don't know," he said finally, voice low, steady and deliberately neutral. Her eyes dropped. She nodded. The quiet was unbearable, heavier than any argument could have been. It was the kind of pain that came not from confrontation, but from restraint. They were both learning something essential. Love was not always loud. Sometimes it existed in silences, in shared glances, in careful touches of responsibility and care. And sometimes love meant waiting until the right moment, even when the clock seemed too short. The 90 days were nearly over. Amara finished her packing, labeling folders, organizing emails, preparing to leave. She told herself it was just a contract, that everything had been work, that any feelings were her imagination, exaggerated by closeness and long hours. Jun Seok closed his office door behind him one evening and stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. He thought of her laughter, the way she had been kind to everyone without expectation, the way she understood him without asking. He realized he had been waiting for permission to care fully, and that the clock was almost out. They had both grown, silently and painfully, in this space between work and emotion, distance and longing. Stay till the end. This moment matters. The morning of the final week arrived with a quiet intensity. Amara had her suitcase packed, files organized, and her calendar cleared for the handover. Every detail had been checked twice. Every responsibility accounted for. Yet the rhythm of her breathing betrayed the tension she carried. She had imagined leaving with certainty, but certainty felt impossible now. Jun Seok moved through the office differently, too. His usual precision remained, but there was a softness in his gaze, a way he watched her with attention that went beyond professional concern. He did not speak it, and neither did she, but both understood the gravity of the days remaining. During one of their last site visits together, the sun fell low across the horizon, casting long shadows over the half-finished buildings. The air smelled faintly of salt and dust. They walked side by side in silence, comfortable yet taut with unspoken words. "You've done remarkable work," Jun Seok said finally, not looking at her but at the construction below. "It won't be easy to fill these shoes." Amara smiled faintly, grateful for the acknowledgement, but distracted by the heaviness she felt in her chest. "It wasn't just me," she said softly. "It never is." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her in a way that made her pulse catch. Evening came, and the office lights dimmed automatically. The building was nearly empty. Papers were stacked neatly, laptops closed, and a quiet settled over the space. She turned to him, suitcase in hand, hesitation in her movements. "I suppose this is it." He remained still, words caught somewhere between caution and desire. "Yes," he said finally, steady but soft. "This is it." The air between them was thick, not with anger or drama, but with recognition of what had formed, of what was real, of what they had both been unwilling to name until the last moment. Amara swallowed. "Jun Seok, He stopped her gently, his hand hovering near hers. "No need," he said. "Not yet. Let's just acknowledge this, that what we built here matters." She nodded, her eyes glistening. The honesty in his voice carried the weight of all the silent hours, all the small kindnesses, all the shared responsibility. They stood together, breathing in the same quiet, both aware that in another week, the 90 days would be over, and life would demand choices. The days that followed were filled with preparation, handovers, and final briefings. Every interaction was professional, but layered with an intimacy they no longer denied to themselves. Words became fewer, glances longer. Every small gesture, holding the door, passing a pen, checking a document, carried the weight of what neither dared to say aloud. Amara found herself pausing before leaving for the last time, suitcase in hand, and watching him across the office. The man who had been a colleague, a guide, a quiet anchor, now held her attention fully. Jun-seok met her gaze, and finally allowed a small smile. Not the careful, reserved smile of before, but one that reached his eyes, softening the edges of his composure. They realized that this was no fleeting infatuation. This was partnership. Deliberate, patient, honest. Something that had grown in silence, in shared responsibility, in moments that went unnoticed by anyone else. The courage to act, to speak, to claim what had taken root did not come in a rush. It came quietly, deliberately, as the last day arrived. The final morning arrived with soft light spilling through the office windows, painting the room in gold and pale blue. Amara walked in, suitcase in hand, her steps measured. Every corner of the office was familiar now, every sound, every hum. And yet today felt different. Today was not about work. It was about decisions long deferred. Jun-seok was already there, reviewing documents one last time. He looked up as she entered, his expression calm but alert, as if he had been preparing for this exact moment for months. "Good morning," he said, voice steady, but warmer than it had been in weeks. "Good morning," she replied, trying to sound composed, though her heart was anything but. They moved through the office ritual together, checking final notes, confirming handovers, signing approvals. Each action carried the weight of their shared time, each gesture layered with meaning neither dared speak aloud. Finally, the work was done. Amara zipped her laptop into her bag and exhaled. "I suppose this is truly it," she said softly. Jun-seok closed his folder, his gaze holding hers. "Yes," he said, pausing. Then, carefully, deliberately, he stepped closer. "But some things do not have to end just because the work does." Her chest tightened. She knew what he meant, even before he said it. He held out his hand, an invitation, not a demand. "Amara, would you consider continuing this, us, beyond these 90 days? She studied him for a moment, reading the sincerity in his eyes, the steady calm of a man who had finally named what he felt. Her own heart, which had carried the unspoken for so long, surged with quiet certainty. She reached out, taking his hand gently. "Yes," she whispered, and the word felt like home. It was not dramatic. There were no desperate confessions, no sweeping gestures, just honesty, calm and deliberate. A slow, deliberate choice made with full awareness of what had grown between them. They walked out of the office together, hands intertwined. The city outside was alive, but it no longer seemed overwhelming. The 90 days had ended, but something lasting had begun. Weeks later, they found themselves back in the quiet rhythm of work, now shared with intention rather than duty. Meals were shared without thought of schedules, conversations lingered without apology, silences were comfortable and full. The partnership they had cultivated had grown into love, steady, patient, full of respect and of understanding. Amara looked out her apartment window one evening, coffee warm in her hands. Jun-seok sat across the room, quietly reading, a gentle smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The life she had imagined, the one that had once felt too orderly, too precise, now felt complete. It was not perfect. There were still responsibilities, challenges, and long days ahead. But love existed in the spaces between, in shared purpose and quiet faith, in laughter, in gentle glances, in deliberate choices. Time moved forward, as it always did, but they moved forward together. And in that, there was peace, there was hope, there was home. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more clean Afro-Korean romances.